Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Today I'm going to cover Crito, a short dialogue by Plato. Plato is author 18 out of 200 for my Immortal Books reading list. Well, I was just preparing the final parts of this episode as I was putting my daughter to sleep, and she asked, "What are you doing, Dad?" And I said, "Well, I'm preparing this. It's by Plato." She said, "Oh, when you say Plato, I think of the toy. I think of the gooey stuff." I said, "Yeah, it's not exactly that. This is the philosopher." So in this episode, I will be talking about the philosopher, not the toy. But I did think that was funny. She's actually studying Greek mythology in school right now. They had a class trip to the Parthenon in Nashville today. There's a replica that was built in downtown Nashville. So she knows what's going on, but I thought that was a kind of a funny little thing to think of the philosopher as the toy Plato. So there is a famous story that gets referenced quite often. I've seen it pop up quite a bit in Greek literature, and it shows up in Herodotus towards the beginning of the work, and it's this discussion between Solon and Croesus. And Croesus is this wildly successful man, and Solon is known as this wise man. And Croesus goes up to Solon and asks him a question of who is the happiest and most prosperous man. And Croesus is hoping that Solon responds, "Well, by gosh, you are, Croesus, you are the happiest and the most prosperous man." But Solon does not respond with that, and instead he says this: "You seem to be very wealthy, and you rule over many people, but I cannot tell you the answer you asked for until I learn how you have ended your life." End quote. So we get just a great idea there in the sense of you can't measure someone's life until you've seen how they died. Did they remain true to the end? Did they take shortcuts at the end to try to minimize suffering or other things like that? If they were known a particular way throughout their life, did they end things in that manner, or did they just get rid of it at the end when things got hard? And this dialogue that we're talking about today by Plato, it's that idea. This is Socrates at the end of his life, and the question is, how will he finish? So this is the period between when Socrates has been condemned to death by his peers for corrupting the youth and creating new gods. But it's before he has been forced to drink the hemlock for the execution. And it's at the very tail end of this. So there was about a 30-day period between when he was sentenced and when he drank the hemlock. And so this is the very end. This is like the day before he is to drink the hemlock. And a friend of his, an old friend, not someone with youthful exuberance or something like that, but Crito, an old friend, shows up and provides him with a temptation of sorts, but from good motives. This is we can think of this guy as a longtime friend, a good friend of Socrates, and he's making a final appeal. And the appeal is this: for Socrates to escape his sentence of death. And we get the idea that this is legitimate. This is not just a pipe dream or dreaming, but that Crito has the monetary means and the influence to make this a reality. And he's thought up through the plan on how they would get him out and all that. The monetary means, he would have enough money basically to bribe the prison warden to get Socrates out and then to get him to a different location. And he's using all sorts of arguments to get Socrates to do this. And he makes this statement. So this is Crito to Socrates: "You seem to me to choose the easiest path, whereas one should choose the path a good and courageous man would choose, particularly when one claims throughout one's life to care for virtue." End quote. So he's really placing this in the language of virtue, and that Socrates would be virtuous to escape. And Socrates responds with this: "We must examine whether we should act in this way or not, as not only now, but at all times." End quote. I love that. But not only now, but at all times. So this ties in directly with that piece from Herodotus that I read. Socrates wants to end well. He doesn't want to have said a bunch of things his whole life and then, here's a nice little opportunity to escape death at the very end, at the last moment. But if I do that, I would have to deny all the things that I've been saying my whole life. But even higher than that, I would have to be denying justice. And so Socrates puts this into the language of justice. Would it be right for him to escape? Not can I do it or should I do it for my family and my friends or even myself, but is it right for me to escape? So here are some things that Socrates says along those lines. Do we say that there is no way that one must ever willingly commit injustice, or does it depend upon circumstances? Another translation said, or have we jettisoned all our former convictions in these last few days? End quote. I love that. Just this idea of, is justice kind of a solid thing? Is it a continuous thing, or can we just, if circumstances get tough, we're about to die here. Can't we just kind of slide by here? The basic gist here is my case an exceptional one where the law doesn't apply? And so there's an issue of obligations here. There's a question of obligations. And so who does Socrates have an obligation to? Is his obligation to his friends, his family, and to himself, or is it to justice? And the Greeks thought, in one of the introductions that I read, it said the Greeks had thought about obligations in two different ways. They thought of at the first level as obligations to other human beings. So this would be what justice would cover, and this was personal. This was a personal level. This is how you treated other people. It dealt with those things. So the obligations to other people. So obviously very personal. This is person to person. The second level though was more impersonal, and it had to do with the obligations that the Greeks had to deceased human beings and the gods. And this is what would be known more as piety. And piety would be a portion of justice. So if justice is a circle, maybe piety is kind of a dot within that circle. But justice is dealing, again, with person to person. Piety is dealing with person to gods or person to deceased humans. Maybe deceased parents or honoring these deceased people. And what is brilliant here, we understand levels of justice at a personal level. Things when it's impersonal, it can be easier to think of it in a different way. Like it's harder to have duty to some abstract law as it is to have duty to a person that is right in front of you. And so what is brilliant about this particular dialogue is that Plato personifies the laws. He personifies that second set of obligations to where they take on human form in a way. And then Socrates ends up kind of going back and forth with this personification of the laws of Athens. So now it's not just, I can disobey this law. I can escape my sentence of death. Because it's this impersonal law. It's not really hurting anybody. It's just, I would just be escaping. It goes from that to being a personalized law. Okay, so now you're impacting others. And I guess the best way to describe this is to just read what Socrates says through Plato's writing here. So this is Socrates in response to Crito. He says, look at it this way. If as we were planning to run away from here, or whatever one should call it, the laws and the state came and confronted us and asked, tell me, Socrates, what are you intending to do? Let me take myself out of the quote here for a second. So here Socrates says, the laws and the state came and confronted us and asked. So the laws and the state have become personified things here. And so now let me read on. And so these are the personified laws speaking now. Do you not, by this action you are attempting, intend to destroy us, the laws, and indeed the whole city, as far as you are concerned? Or do you think it is possible for a city not to be destroyed if the verdicts of its courts have no force but are nullified and set at naught by private individuals? End quote. So do you intend to destroy us or the whole city as far as you're concerned? If he was to escape, what that does is it nullifies and sets at naught the courts and the verdicts. Because if Socrates disobeys that, it gives someone else the right in their mind to do likewise. Because if Socrates could do it, why can't I do it? And so if there is a law there, if there is a verdict that has been set and Socrates disobeys that, it sets a precedent and it nullifies justice and it overthrows justice, and it's by personifying it here, you're now battling people. And the brilliant thing about personifying it is it does impact people ultimately. If Socrates is to disobey this, if he is not to go through with this, if he is to try to escape, then it makes it easier for other people to do it. He's setting a direction as a citizen, but he's setting a direction in a way that you do not want society to go. You don't want all of a sudden all these people to start not obeying laws because Socrates did not obey the law. So Socrates continues on from there and says, he talks about, if I do escape, how would I be welcomed somewhere else? Because I would come to that land with a reputation. And the reputation would be that I am a destroyer of the laws. So it's part of the immigration debate today. Do you just take people in who are lawbreakers from their own country? If they were breaking laws in their own country, doesn't it seem like they would probably keep doing that in a new country? And so that's one argument Socrates makes. And then he makes just the most brilliant argument, because we know that he was part of his sentencing, part of what was against him was that he was corrupting the youth. And so he says this, as a destroyer of the laws, you will also strengthen the conviction of the jury that they passed the right sentence on you, for anyone who destroys the laws could easily be thought to corrupt the young and the ignorant. End quote. So if he does do this, if he does escape, he will be one who is corrupting the young and the ignorant. And so the thing that he was sentenced for, the thing that he was accused of, which he said that he didn't do, if he escapes, he would actually be doing the thing that he was sentenced for, of corrupting the young, and he does not want to do that. Here's the laws talking again. Be persuaded by us who have brought you up, Socrates. Do not value either your children or your life or anything else more than goodness, in order that when you arrive in Hades, you may have all this as your defense before the rulers there. End quote. So now the laws are saying, the personified laws are saying, in the city, it's kind of like the city that brought Socrates up. So Athens in general here. Do not value your children or your life, kind of that first step of obligations. Do not value that more than goodness, because it's going to have an impact in the next life as well, in Hades. And you'll have this as a defense before the rulers there. If you do this thing, if you escape, you will not have that power when you get to Hades. You will have gotten rid of that power or that defense before the rulers there. So just another really neat idea of way. It's not just even about this life. It's about how in Hades this will impact you if, Socrates, you take this step. There's kind of a further idea of a social contract in this, that Athens, the city, raised him. And as such, Socrates made a contract that he would then obey the laws. To not do that would be injustice, as not only now but at all times. So there's this idea that there is a higher law in all this that must be obeyed. It trumps it trumps what that first obligation to his family, to himself, to his friends. There is a higher law. There's a justice that he must obey. This is a short work. It's under 20 pages, and that's kind of the main gist of what happens. There's a lot to the arguments in between. So it's definitely worth the read, and just one of the great dialogues by Plato here. I ended up reading two different versions, and then I referenced the introduction of a third version. So the versions that I read were from the Complete Works by John M. Cooper, and then I read the Penguin Classics that came from the last days of Socrates. And so those are the two versions that I read. And then I picked up a third version called Defense of Socrates, and that is the Oxford World's Classics, and that one's translated by David Gallop. But I just read the intro for that one. I find the intros to be so helpful, especially after I've read the work, and then to see a number of different intros. It just kind of helps me to understand different things. So I'm going to keep this episode short. I'm not going to have different segments. I'm going to go right into my one thing here, and then we'll close out. So the one thing that sticks out the most in this dialogue is that idea of the personified laws. And I remember the first time reading this dialogue just a few weeks ago, and when I came across that part of the laws becoming personified, it did something in my head. It just makes you think about them in a different way. And it also made me think back a couple of years to when I was reading kind of the beginnings of Greek mythology. So mythology by Edith Hamilton. I read the Homeric hymns, Hesiod's Theogony, and what you see there is that things that we think of as abstractions are personified. So there is a god of death, there is a god of sleep, of deceit, of strife, of victory. And so these things that we just think of as ideas or abstractions, they're personified. And when you see that, it really makes you consider it from a different way. So the god of strife in the Iliad will go through the lines of soldiers in the armies, and just strife will arise from that. And you think of that, or sleep, like the god of sleep will come and just make someone super tired. And so these things, thinking of them in a personified way, just it really opens up just new ways of thinking about them. So seeing the laws becoming personified, it did that same thing to me. It was just one of those, wow, this is a really amazing way to think about this. It's almost like a mental model of just taking yourself out of the impersonal side of laws and how we think of them. But here's personified laws, not only personified, but Socrates is going back and forth with them. They're having a discussion. It was just a really incredible thing. So that's my one thing. Maybe the second thing is just that idea of as not only now, but at all times. So if Socrates is saying something his whole life, the 70 years of his life, and then there's this temptation at the very end, the day before he's supposed to die, to escape, can he do that? As not only now, but at all times. It's a great line to live by. So in conclusion, this is a very short dialogue. It's under 20 pages. It asks some great questions. It gets to the heart of the matter, the heart of justice, the heart of obligations. And I just think of we're just in the news. We're just constantly confronted with people who take shortcuts for themselves, for their families, for their friends, but they don't perhaps consider the weightier ideas of justice. And here is Socrates at the end of his life, and he's doing just that. And yeah, So that I'll finish out the last of what are called kind of the defense of Socrates or the last days of Socrates. I'll finish and cover the last one next week, which is Phaedo. And then after that, I'm just going to keep going on in the complete works of Plato. I'm calling it the Plato Project. I do hope to read all of them. I've only read 4 so far, and there's quite a few of them. So we'll see how that goes. But that's the plan as of right now. Next month, if you're interested in joining, I'm leading a short Great Books reading group on Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. To join that, all you need to do is become a paid subscriber on the Substack for Books of Titans. You can do that for as little as $5 per month, and we'll be discussing that book the second week of October on Wednesday. So it's a fantastic book. I'd love for you to join in on that conversation. Thanks for sticking with me the last couple weeks. I had interviewed author Alan Levi and just had a great time doing that. And so I released those 2 interviews over the past 2 weeks on this podcast. And so if you have read Theo of Golden, the book that Alan Levi wrote, I invite you to listen to those episodes. If you haven't read it, make sure you read the book before you listen to those episodes, because there are quite a few spoiler alerts. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you. You can email me at eric@booksoftitans.com. If you have a comment about this particular dialogue or something you want to share, please do that on Substack so everyone else can see it as well. You can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter, and please make sure to go to the website. I've got a lot of sources there, my reading lists, my Immortal Books reading list, and all sorts of stuff like that. I'll be back next week. I will be covering another work by Plato. Until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.